There's now an awareness of how abstractions and concepts get made by your mind, and there's now a taking of responsibility. See, at the earlier stages, people weren't responsible. The ego mind wasn't responsible. It wasn't willing to take responsibility for language, for how it creates categories and concepts and abstractions. These were just taken as a given. They were just adopted blindly from culture. But now you start to take responsibility for that. This is both challenging, it's also liberating, because it opens you up to now explore new ways in which your mind can work outside of the limitations of your culture and your language. This stage, the construct-aware stage, is really hitting up against the limits of the human mind. And you would think that you can't go beyond the human mind, because the human mind, well, I mean, we're humans, right? So, and we have minds, so how can a human go beyond the human mind? But as it turns out, there are minds beyond the human mind, and that actually you're not a human. The idea that you're a human is just part of a construct that you took for granted as part of your culture. You never really questioned whether you were a human or not, actually. There's no scientific evidence that you're a human. If you really think about that deeply, you'll realize there's no such thing. After all, what is a human? What is a human? What does it mean to be human? Why can't you go beyond human? Turns out you can. And so now you're starting to realize these possibilities. Before, such possibilities seemed like woo-woo nonsense, seemed like airy-fairy, new-agey, unscientific, pseudoscience bullshit, Deepak Chopra type stuff. But now you realize, wait a minute, there's actually something deeper, something truer to what Deepak Chopra is saying, and that there really is something beyond the human mind that you can reach, you can access, if you're willing to let go of your human identity. But that's a big if. But of course, at this stage, you're starting to let it go, because now you're becoming aware that the human identity is just sort of a facade or a mask that you've been wearing, and you can take it off. And actually, taking it off has many amazing advantages. It allows you to really let your mind flourish and go beyond the human, whatever that is. And at this point, you don't really know what that is. It's open, exciting territory to discover, new and exciting territory for you to open up and explore. At this stage, the conventional belief in a permanent, objective, external world starts to be questioned. Literally, the notion of a material world starts to break down. The distinction between mind and body, self and reality starts to break down. I'm not a separate self who happened to be born into reality, but rather I was always entangled and part of reality. Objective and clear self-identification starts to be questioned at this stage. This stage has a flexible, continuously deconstructing, non-reified notion of self. What does that mean? Well, it means the self is not a physical object that was born, but rather the self is sort of like an amalgamation of ideas and beliefs and concepts and abstractions that were cobbled together in an ad hoc fashion, sort of like a snowball rolling down a hill, or like a Katamari Damacy, one of those Katamari Damacy balls, just, collecting stuff as it rolls along the ground, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's sort of like what the self is. And so this self, of course, is not a permanent thing. It's constantly changing. As the ball rolls through through town, the Katamari Damacy ball, it clings onto couches and cats and dogs and fire hydrants, and it accumulates at all trees and so forth, and it becomes just this giant tangled mess. And that is the self. But of course, you're always rolling. Even right now, as I'm sitting here, my mind is changing, my self is changing. Even as I'm teaching you, by the time I'm done recording this, I will have learned something about this material that I didn't fully realize or fully understand, deeply yet when I started recording. And myself will actually slightly change from having made this recording. And then when I publish it, I read all the comments and feedback that I get, which I do. Your feedback will further deepen my understanding of this material because I will hear from you what kind of stuff you like or don't like, what you understand, what you misunderstand. I will hear all that feedback. I will incorporate that, and that will further change my sense of self. It'll make me question certain things that I say, or it'll make me, it'll validate certain things that I said in my own mind. It'll make me contemplate deeper this material. And in this way, I'm always changing, and you are also changing. By the time this episode is over, your ears, having received this information, will have transformed your brain and your mind, and your sense of self will slightly shift just from listening to this talk. Now, of course, that's just the beginning. You're going to have to do a lot more work to really change yourself. But hey, in and of itself, just listening to this material, to advanced material like this, in and of itself is self-transforming. Your self is changing as you're watching these videos, because this is profound material. It just is. If it wasn't profound, I wouldn't be talking about it. At this stage, there's an acute awareness of how life is an endless interplay of polar opposites. The construct-aware mind is good at cross-paradigmatic thinking. It's good at integrating multiple systems and paradigms. So, for example, it's at this stage where you can really start to appreciate and understand religion, comparative religion. You can really take a deep look into Christianity and the various branches of Christianity, and then Buddhism and Hinduism and Judaism and other types of mystical schools, and you can take the exoteric religions and the esoteric ones, and you can kind of lay them all out, and you can look at them, and you can see, so this is what they were talking about here, and that's how they were talking about there, and then you can draw connections. You can see how all of these things interconnect and interrelate, and you can see subtle commonalities and subtle differences between them, and you can evaluate all this without judging these paradigms. You can shift from one perspective to the next. You can see the world through a Christian perspective. You can take off that lens. You can see the world through a Buddhist perspective. You could see it through both at the same time. Then you could take all those off. You could see it without any of those perspectives. You could see it through an atheist perspective, and you can integrate atheism and theism and agnosticism and skepticism and rationality and mysticism. All of it can be integrated together, and it all works. And this is both amazing. It's very satisfying to be able to do this with your mind. Because you interconnect so much, you integrate so much. There's a sense of unity that comes about, intellectual unity in doing this. And no longer are you playing these games of demonizing various systems or worldviews, because you're able to embrace them all and see them from a higher meta perspective. And you're able to appreciate their strengths, and you're also keenly aware of their limitations, and the ways in which they're corrupted, and the ways in which they're deluded or self-deceived. And you're able to go beyond them all while incorporating lessons from them as well.